Hello, once again, Niner Faithful, and welcome to another episode of the JFA Podcast. We are going to talk all things Ravens. We're going to look back a little bit and talk about what happened against the Cardinals, especially with the run defense. Looking forward to a game with the Ravens where I hear they like to run the ball. So, it may end up being some matchup problems for the 49ers, but we have Ant here from 49ers Cutback, and we are going to dive into a lot of things. It's going to be a great show, going to have a lot of fun. So stay tuned. Here we go. Well, welcome in. Mr. Ant, do I call you Mr. Or is it just going to be Ant-Man? Which do you prefer?
Call me Ant-Man, whatever, Mr. Ant. I don't care. It don't matter to me.
Well, welcome in. Thank you so much for joining the channel today. Hey, for anybody who may not be as familiar with you, if they're from my side of the pond, I guess, on our channels, where can we find you? Tell us a little bit about your podcast and just how you got into it.
Yeah, so you can find me at 49ers Cutback pretty much everywhere, YouTube, and then, of course, all the social medias, X, Facebook, Instagram. It's all at 49ers Cutback. And I got started, I was a coach. I coached high school football for a while, and it got to COVID, and there was no more high school football, and the school that I coached at actually went away. Like, it just was gone. And so it was an opportunity to do something different. And so I decided I was going to try to talk 49ers. It was a passion of mine. I loved it. And I thought, hey, this is a perfect time. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. And so I did. And I did it with some friends. And through the years, some of those, people have went away and did other things, but I'm still here and I'm still trekking. And I love football. I love the 49ers. So I'm always talking about it, and I enjoy doing it and interacting with all the people that I get to interact with. There's a lot of really good people that are 49er fans. And that's one of my favorite things to do is just, talk shop with all of them. And so that's why I do it. And then this year, I joined Believe, and I've been doing a lot of stuff with them. It gave me a lot of opportunities. If you've been in an airport, you might have seen me. I do some of the Reach TV stuff. So it's been just a real blast, and I'm enjoying the journey.
That's awesome. So real quick for our chat, one thing I like to do on our channel is it helps support the algorithms to draw some activity. The way the YouTube algorithm works is that the more people the more people comment on videos, it says that people are engaging, and that's a good thing for YouTube. So they will start recommending these videos to more people who watch similar things. So if you would, in the chat, hashtag JD49 if you're on my channel. If you're on the 49ers Cutback channel with Ant, do hashtag Ant, and let's get some engagement on there. You can see we can draw more people in, because sometimes people, I don't know if people are like me, you don't always see the notifications. They sometimes don't always go off. I got channels that I have notifications set onto that I don't get notifications from sometimes. And that's just the way YouTube works sometimes. It's a little weird. But if you're on your YouTube homepage and you're scrolling through and people are engaging, it's more likely for YouTube to recommend that video to you if people are engaging on it. So it's a free way you can support either channel. So if you can hit that. But man, that is awesome. So you talked a little bit about how coaching high school football. Dive into that a little bit with us, and kind of, again, for maybe people who aren't as familiar with you, talk a little bit more about your football background and what specifically about that kind of has helped you out where you are now.
Yeah, so my dad was a coach, and so my background from the beginning was about the basic techniques and skills, and so I really got into that. And then my high school had a project. It was called it was like a senior project, and we learned a lot about it. It was like a career path thing, and I decided that football was going to be that. So I took a year and I coached youth football. But I started consuming everything I could as far as clinics. I started going to the Glazier clinics and listening to other coaches talk. And I really fell in love with the X's and O's of the game compared to just playing the game. Even though I enjoyed playing it, I finally got more depth. It wasn't that my high school coaches weren't good coaches, but they didn't really have all the depth that I was starting to learn. So once I got into the X's and O's, I fell in love with it. and I worked my way up, from being, assistant position coach to position coach. And then pretty soon it was time for me to be a coordinator. And I did that until I became a head coach. And the end of my, high school career, I was the head coach of a school in Stockton, a Christian school there, and really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of that. But overall, the process, I learned that I will never know everything there is to know about football. I will never even come close to knowing everything, and that it's my job to consistently try to learn more, because it's just ever changing, ever evolving. And that's why I love it, because it's one of the greatest games ever, if probably the greatest game ever. I'm very biased about that, but just 11 guys operating, one play, trying to execute it the exact way it's supposed to make it work, is so awesome. And it's just a chess match, coaches versus coaches, then the players versus players. I just love everything about it, and that's why I just have to stay in it. If I wasn't doing a podcast, I'd probably be coaching again. I just love football.
Man, that's awesome. And we have a very similar track on that. For me, I didn't go into coaching with high school ball. I was on a different path in my life, but once I graduated high school, I played in high school and really got into the X's and O's then, because our coaches that I had in high school, it was very much, here, just do this job and do what I'm telling you to do. And when I started, because I didn't start playing until I was in high school, and in our town, most people were playing the same systems and using the same nomenclature from the time they were like in grade school all the way through junior high and into high school. So our high school, we didn't even have a playbook. And we had our defensive playbook was really, if you call a playbook, we called about 20 different plays. And if you're trying to learn those things on the fly and you have no idea, when they say cover 3, and you're trying to just have a rote memorization of, I do this on cover 3, and you don't understand and I'm a visual learner, so not being able to visualize what everybody was supposed to do, I struggled so hard. I had no idea what I was doing. And then the offensive side of the playbook was the same way. They're spouting out these words. I'm like, I have no idea what these words mean, and I'm literally trying to piece together a full 2 sentences of a play and memorize the whole thing as to what I was supposed to do, not understanding the language of that this is broken up into a bunch of different parts. That once and the hardest thing was understanding the language, because nobody was teaching that to me. And it was my sophomore year. I was so rough. I ended up then taking that off season, and I went to my coach. I'm like, how do I figure this out? Like, what is there a playbook I can look at? They said, no, we don't have a playbook. I said, how do I figure this out? And I got some resources of, okay, here is how I can figure out kind of the game. And I took it upon myself to learn the game. And that sparked a desire to learn as much as I could. And as the years have gone by, I went to a college that didn't have a football program. It was really crazy. The Seahawks literally practiced on our campus, but we didn't have a football program. It was the weirdest thing. And then they left. They went and built their new facility in Renton. And I say new, it's like 15 years old now. But they built their facility in Renton, left their entire headquarters with all their practice fields and everything at the university, handed over to the university. It still doesn't have a football program. I'm like, what is going on here? You have the basis for one of the greatest college programs that could be there. All the facilities you need there. They won't do a football program. But anyways, that became like a hobby of mine of learning it. And like you said, there is so much. That's what I love about football. There is so much depth to everything. And we were talking about this right before we came on, of that there's still times I have questions about things and I reach out to people, and there's times that you see things and you go, huh, I wonder what that's all about. Or what I love is sometimes when you see a call that you're seeing a defense like, and this was one thing I really enjoyed going back and watching Brian Flores' defense from Minnesota. When I scouted them out and I watched their game against the Chargers, I spent so much time with their game against the Chargers, because there would be some plays I was watching over and over and over again, trying to piece together their coverage rules, because it was like a man blitz, but they were obviously playing zone behind it. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out how, with where they are they going to be able to account for what the offense can do? And like sitting there trying to figure it out, because Brian Flores to me does some of the most creative things as far as coverages of how to match things. And it was funny then to watch when we played Minnesota, and It was one of the games Minnesota played. It was on a Monday night game where Troy Aikman was talking about how they blitz so much, and he goes, and you think they're playing man, but they're actually playing zone behind it. It is like that confirmation of what you're seeing, where so many people say, well, they just blitz all this, they'll blitz 6 guys and you got to beat man. And I'm going, no, they're not playing man on the back end. They're playing some very interesting zones there. And I love that kind of stuff, like looking into it, trying to reverse engineer and figure out what they're doing. And like you said, there's so much depth to the game of looking at it, and you can take one play sometimes, and there's so many layers to look at. And I found, for me, that's why I had to do my film breakdowns the way I do it, in the presentation I do with all the drawing of it, because I found if I was just sitting there like trying to draw people through and walk people through, I could spend 15 minutes on one play, and there would be so much like kind of just rolling on and just keep talking about certain things, because I had to like focus it down. Okay, how do I do this? And then also make it to where it's digestible for somebody who maybe like is from Germany and has no background in football. And that's what's been really fun for me to watch. I'll have people commenting on my videos who are like, "Hey, cheers here from Germany. This has really helped me understand the game." I'm like, "Dang, and I can look at the analytics and see 10% of my viewers come from people outside of the United States." And to see how football has spread around the world. And then, the thought of, yeah, this would be crazy for somebody who maybe is in the United Kingdom or Japan or Germany, who they didn't grow up watching football. They didn't grow up playing football. And, so there's so many things from the basics. And so one thing I love that I've seen on some of your channels is that you talk about the fundamentals of players, of guys, let's look at this guy, when coming off of the last game, you were talking a lot about Javon Kinlaw and getting his pads too high. And I love that, because that was something I saw, especially in the third quarter, into the early fourth quarter. I remember there was a couple plays there where they literally blew Javon Kinlaw and Ty McGill off the ball, like 4 or 5 yards off the ball. I think they're just running duo and moving those guys 4 or 5 yards off the ball and creating a new line of scrimmage. And that was a little troubling. I was sitting there going, Javon, you were a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. You should not be getting blown off the ball 5 yards. T.Y. McGill, he was a guy who played very well for us last year when he got some chances. But he's more that kind of quick, almost Javon Hargrave style, where he's going to use his quickness to get around double teams and stuff and penetrate, but wasn't able to do that in this game. And you're seeing them create a new line of scrimmage. And so I loved how you were talking about Javon Kinlaw's pad level in there. With that, can we talk a little bit about the run game struggles against the Cardinals? Because they gave up 234 yards, I believe is what it was, against the Cardinals. And you're coming against a Baltimore team that loves to run the ball. And they have. I mean, that's been John Harbaugh since he's been there, has been running the ball. Even when you go back to when Joe Flacco was there, who's now having some sort of weird resurgence with the Browns. But you go back to Joe Flacco with the Ravens and John Harbaugh. They were a running team. I remember the year that Joe Flacco won the Super Bowl with us. That year he threw for like 3,200 yards, 3,300 yards, something like that. He was not a 4,000 yard passer. He had a lot fewer yards passing per game that year than Brock Purdy is this year, because they were a running team. They ran the snot out of the ball. That's been a John Harbaugh thing. So how do you feel about the defense coming off of the run defense coming off of the game against the Cardinals?
It makes me nervous, because whenever you see players dominated the way that they were dominated, especially once Kalia Davis went down and the rotation changed and you had 3 guys pretty much rotating through, you could tell Kinlaw was getting tired, Givens was getting tired, and you're right, T.Y. McGill, he didn't look as good as he did last year. And my concerns are, this has always been an issue with 49ers not named Eric Armstead, is they get pushed back in the double team. And even Hargrave at times, because he's a smaller guy, he's built skinny through that and break that double team up, or they can't hold their ground and get low. They get blown up. That makes it tough for Fred. That makes it tough for Dre. And that's when you start really having some issues. So the duo block has always been a problem for interior 49ers defensive linemen. And that muddies things up for the linebackers and their reads, and also how they get downhill to make their plays. So I have real concerns about it. If Armstead and Hargrave are back, the 49ers will have a good chance of not really stopping, but slowing down the Ravens running game. If they're not there, I am completely worried because you don't really have a rotation that's a full rotation. And now your rotation is going to include somebody from the practice squad, someone they sign off the street. To me, this is one of those things I'm really concerned about. And, teams this year have done different things. We've seen a lot of traps. They've taken advantage of the 49ers and the traps. I think Baltimore could come with a couple of things. You can use the 49ers interior defensive linemen's aggressiveness against them and trap them. And we saw that happen to Kalia Davis and T.Y. McGill as well. So this one is a scary one, especially with Gus Edwards going to be handling most of the running back duties. It means downhill, here we come. And that usually means duo blocks.
Yeah. And just like you said, the duo is something that we've struggled with. We did a pretty good job against Dallas. One thing Mike McCarthy loves, he loves that duo inside. And if you don't know what we're talking about when we say duo, so one way I've heard duo described, I think Joe Staley said this is how Greg Roman, what he called it. He didn't call it duo. He called it power, no puller. That it's a duo is it's a power man run, an inside power man run with zone blocking principles. So you have zone blocking principles there, but they're going to focus on double teams that are going to move vertically, not horizontally, that you would normally get from an inside zone. So an inside zone is going to work left and right, and they're going to be working a read on that. A duo, you're going to have double team blocks up the middle, and they're going to try and move those defensive tackles vertically and force the linebackers to choose and then peel off and block. So it's one that duo has been around for a long time. I remember it was offensive coordinator. He was with the Panthers for a long time. Old Cowboys offensive coordinator. Norv Turner, when he was in Carolina, I remember him running duo a lot with Cam Newton in a lot of these zone read option kind of looks that zone read, that adding that quarterback element in with that duo becomes really, really tough to stop. It has been surprising me that I haven't seen the Eagles run more of that during their time. They tend to be inside zone, or I call it center lead. People call it pin and pull, but where they block down with Landon Dickerson, pull Kelsey around to lead up. They don't run a lot of duo, but the Ravens, when you watch them, they do like to run that. And they will work your inside guys, and they're going to sit there and put stress on that. So how do you start accounting for those? Can your defensive tackles anchor? Because they have to anchor against that. And can they keep your linebackers free? Now, when we played Seattle ran more of that than I thought they were going to. But we handled Seattle's offensive line very well. Of course, I also came away from Seattle's game. I don't know if you came away this way. I was very underwhelmed by Seattle's offensive line in the run game. For a team that's like, you saw why they're struggling so much in its first down, second down runs, and then third and long, and they were almost always in there. Like there were plays where their offensive line, the effort out of Seattle's offensive line was so poor. I was going, what in the world are they doing here? Like, this does not look like a Pete Carroll team. Anyways, that's a sidebar. But that is a concern of mine. In how do you anchor against that? Can we hunker down? Because our guys do like to slip blocks. Our linebackers use speed more than power on a lot of the blocks. The one guy who does tend to fill against offensive linemen really hard is Dre Greenlaw. And I remember there was a player who was early on against Philly. He absolutely demolished Jason Kelsey in the hole when he had a pin and pull when he came on that center lead, and it was just so amazing to watch because then Philadelphia didn't come back to that play for like 2 series. And that was one of their staple plays last year. So it was so fun to watch that. But one concern I have, and I want to get your take on this certain thing, is I do not like Flanigan Fouls as the Sam. That gives me heartburn, mainly because Flanigan Fouls is a guy that I think he plays the scheme very well. He is not a great tackler. And like I think when he's given a job where he doesn't have to make the tackle, he's usually pretty solid. But when he's the guy who has to make the tackle, it's a rough day for the defense. I remember there was a play against Seattle. They ran a toss play, and somebody else got the tackle. I think it was Tayshaun Gibson or Jair Brown, one of the two, and or it was Javon Kinlaw. He ran it down where Flanigan Fouls led around. Oren Burks had been out, and he absolutely stuffed one of their offensive linemen, set the edge, turned it back in. But when you see him having to fill an open hole and make a tackle, it's rough usually. So how do you feel about Flanigan Fouls there at the Sam?
Yeah, I've had some ups and downs with Flanigan Fouls. It was a couple years ago they were playing, and it was one of the worst films I've seen in a long time. I don't like to get overly critical of players. Like, I like to give coaching points and then kind of move on with it, but it was so bad. Now I have to give a lot of credit. The Weeks played well. I mean, and there's a lot of times you get good play from Flanigan Fouls. I think sometimes with him, he's a little slow to pull the and he's a little slow to get up there in the action. See, I like Oren Burks because Burks' lanes and the lines he takes to get to ball carriers is great. He works across blockers really well. And it's so important for linebackers to get into their proper windows and prevent, these plays from having big breakout plays. And I think sometimes Flanigan Fouls struggles with that compared to others. But he is a veteran who understands his system and he knows where he's supposed to be. So is it the perfect choice? No. Is it a choice that we can live with because he is at least experienced? Yes, because behind him, Jalen Graham, not experienced at all playing linebacker. And then you've got D. Winters, who's got all the talent in the world, but he's not there yet. So there's just no one right now that can fill that void. I do worry about DFF playing against, a team like the Baltimore Ravens. I worry if he's going to get out-muscled a little bit as well. So I like Flanigan Fouls as a backup. I don't know if I like him as a starter. And now that he's having to be thrusted in there and play, I have real concerns about him in this game, especially because of the success the Ravens have in the run game.
Absolutely. And the thought of Flanigan Fouls in the open field against Lamar Jackson it scares me. Now the Ravens don't have quite the same juice in the running game since they lost Mitchell. They're the guy he's a rookie who was having an outstanding year, explosive running back, and that injury just makes you sick. Young guy having a good year and really starting to solidify himself as maybe the leader in the clubhouse for that running back room, and then has just a rough knee injury, gonna miss the rest of this year, obviously, most likely gonna miss a good chunk of next year, probably not gonna be 100% until September of 2025. I mean, that's rough to see for a young guy who was just coming in. I do want to answer one question somebody had here. Michael Lee, he said, Johnny, how do you identify what Kyle calls certain concepts? Are you going through past Niners playbooks? Sometimes yes, actually. I do have Kyle Shanahan's 2018 and 2019 playbooks. Now it helps knowing what you're seeing because you can then filter through the playbook pretty quickly and figure out what things, because different systems guys will call things so many different things. Like there's a play that Kyle Shanahan calls burner or rider that back in Mike Holmgren's day with the 49ers, that same play that Mike Shanahan ended up using later and pulled off of the install tapes was called Speedo. And it was because the route that was the number one was a speed over route. So that's why it's Speed O. And Kyle Shanahan calls it rider. Now that has nothing to do with the route name, because the main route on there is a high crosser. I don't know why he calls it rider. I don't know why he calls one burner. He has what I knew as Yankee sit. He calls it heat. Again, why does he call it that way? I don't know. Now, most of his play calls and concepts will be tied into the main route that's involved, and so that's the way it goes through the playbook. Like you'll see there's a concept he calls knife, and it'll have written over the tight end knife. That's for a knife route, and that triggers a certain combination that's going to be on that side with that player. Or there's Tony, which is one of the routes is called a Tony route, and you can find that route in the route tree. Now the route tree is huge. I am working to try and put a video together for my members website that's going to be coming next week, and also for Patreon supporters of going through the Kyle Shanahan route tree. It is massive, just so people know. It is massive. When Christian McCaffrey came in and said he learned the route tree pretty quickly. Now the running back route tree is not that big. Most of them are pretty same. I mean, it's like 5 pages of routes, and they're all one variation of something. There's like three different variations on a check. And that's what it is. There's a check up the middle, there's a check outside, and there's a check release. Like, that's what it is. And then there's like a Texas route. There's very few routes from the running back position, but he also knows the wide receiver route tree. And I'll tell you, the wide receiver route tree is 27 pages long, and it's anywhere from 3 to 10 routes per page. So that gives you an example of how many routes are in Kyle Shanahan's playbook, and why some guys like maybe Danny Gray struggles early on, and why Ronnie Bell maybe doesn't see the field quite as much, because there's a lot of routes to know, and these routes are different things. Now, he has some of them that are interesting to tie together. Like, there's a 5-yard out route, it's called a stick route, an 8-yard out route, it's called a branch route, and a 10-yard out route, it's a tree route. So you have stick, branch, and tree. And so they make sense, so you have some things like that make sense together. But that's how I know some of that stuff. But as Ant will say, it's not like you can just open up a playbook and just suddenly know everything. Because it's like staring at Chinese. Like, if you don't know how to read Chinese, when you open up a playbook and you start going through it and understanding what you're looking at, because they don't have like defenses drawn out in there. You have to know exactly what they're looking for the defense. But anyways, that was a sidebar. I thought that was a good question coming in there. But yeah, it'll be interesting. What do you think for the 49ers? What do you think as far as Steve Wilks, if he's sitting down with his defense this week? Wednesday was intro install day. What do you think his message is? As you coming from somebody, you said you were a defensive coordinator, right? That if you're sitting in front of your defense, what's your message to them for playing against the Ravens? Like, if you're sitting down with your defense, what is your message to them?
My first goal is going to be stopping the run. I mean, that's what we're going to be about. We're going to have a full focus on that. And a lot of that is not just stopping Gus Edwards in this run game, but also trying to limit the effectiveness of Lamar Jackson. And he presents some interesting problems because he's the most dynamic of the running quarterbacks that the 49ers are going to face. There's just no one better than him. To me, he wins more in but he also has dynamite speed. So you have to make sure you're on your P's and Q's as far as what you're doing as an edge defender. What's your responsibility? Are you making sure that you have that running back get the ball? Or are you making sure that Lamar keeps? You have to decide, are you coming down the line of scrimmage to take away the run game and you're allowing a linebacker to be that guy that takes away Lamar Jackson? Or are you going to go ahead and keep Nick Bosa and Chase Young and others in space to handle Lamar Jackson? It's really a hard job to do. So I think that's the main goal, is stopping the run in this game and keeping Lamar Jackson in the pocket as much as possible. I think those are the focuses. How to do that is a little bit more difficult. If you have all your guys, then yes, you're probably going to be able to stop the run and still be able to allocate necessary to Lamar Jackson the read. But if he gets, you have to collapse those defensive ends to help take away the run game. That's when you're going to run into some problems. He can get out in space. No one's more dynamic than Lamar.
Yeah, I mean, with Lamar Jackson, you can be right and still be wrong. And that's the kind of player that Lamar Jackson is. Nick Bosa can play a read perfectly and still not be able to make the play, because Lamar Jackson is just that special of an athlete. And so he does create a lot of problems. I think you're 100% right. He is the most dynamic of these sort of, hybrid quarterbacks. Sometimes I think I like to say that we see out there guys that have the ability to be a runner and a passer, that they create problems. They put stress. They make you play 11-on-11 football. Do want to pop in Michael, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, thanks for such a thorough answer and for all the breakdowns. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, it's tough. I think, there's different tools that Wilks can use. Sometimes he'll use what's called a scrape exchange, where you have the defensive end crash down and you have the linebacker scrape over the top, and you exchange your gap responsibilities so that it can mess with the read on the quarterback. But that's not a cure-all. That's not just, you can just run that every time and that takes away what they do, because the moment you start doing that, now your linebacker is having to move out every single snap. Well, they're just going to run a slant behind that. or they're just going to run a little curl route behind that into that area where he's now moving out to, and you're out leveraged. And that's what the Ravens love to do. When Lamar Jackson, they give him that. The Eagles have done that, where you'll see Lamar Jackson hit like a short post or a slant route or a little curl route over the middle. They're all the time, and the reason they're doing that is because those linebackers will be trying to account for him in the run game. And the moment you use a linebacker to account for him in the run game, now you're getting that area of the field extended. So I think, to me, what you have to do is your interior defensive line has to put their big boy pads on. It's going to be an ice bag game, and say, we're going to anchor against these guys inside. We're going to not give them space, and we want Lamar Jackson to hand that ball off 9 times out of 10. That's what we want to do. And we'll let him pull it a couple times, and we'll get him with a scrape exchange, but most of the time, we want our interior guys with their big boy pads on. We want Dre Greenlaw coming in there and blowing the snot out of some guys and be able to fill that. Because the moment you start having to adjust for him over and over and over again, then they're going to start eating you. It's one thing to be attacking the offense with what they're doing. It's another thing where you're having to react to what the offense is doing. And that's where you don't want to get, is to be in a place where you're reacting, not attacking. Then they have you. Quick question here. I get this one a lot. So thank you, Cynthia. Here he says, if you have Kyle's old playbook, what's to stop other teams from accessing it? That's a great question. That's a fantastic question. There is nothing to stop them from accessing it. I remember when Mike McDaniels was hired by the Dolphins, they asked him something about, are you going to bring all this stuff from San Francisco? How do you make it fresh so that teams don't just know what you're going to do? And he said, it doesn't really matter. You can go buy our playbook online right now. And even then, since then, it's now free. You can find the 2018 playbook on Reddit. And so, I have the 2019. That's a little bit harder to get a hold of. I got if you want to know how I got that one, DM me. I'm not going to make it public. But even if a team had it, there's nothing like if you really know football, like these NFL coaches do, there's nothing in there that's going to be a surprise, really, because it's all there on film. Most of these teams are going to chart out what opponents are doing each week anyways, and kind of make their own playbook anyways. So, I remember Mike Nolan was asked about that. I think it was in 2007 or 2008, where he was asked something about, I think we were about to play the Ravens, and he said, do you worry that they're going to have your playbook because you were there and know what you like to call? And he kind of looked at him. He said, I think there's a lot less secrets in the NFL than people like to assume, meaning that, there's so many eyes watching film and so many things on there. Really, there's not a lot of surprises here. There's, generally what people are going to want to do. Their base offense. The variations. But the thing is, there's so many different things, and this happens so quickly. And it is about getting out leveraged. It's about who's putting in the time and the chess match. Some of these plays, there is not a really good answer out of a certain coverage. Like, you can run a certain coverage, and no matter what you do, that play is going to beat your coverage. So you need to not be in that play. But you don't know when they're going to call it. You don't know, that's when your preparation of studying what they're doing, these coaches go through, and I'm sure you can comment on a little bit about this of what you used to do as far as game planning. You're going to chart out what they do on first down, 1st and 10. You're going to look at what they do on 3rd and short. You're going to know. I mean, there's not as many things that people do in each situation as you would think. 3rd and short, a team may only run 10 plays over the last 2 months on 3rd and short. And so, then you're going to narrow it down to what formations are these plays. I have a game plan from Nick Saban, and even at the college level, where they only spend 20 hours a week with guys, they had every single formation for their opponent charted out and what plays they ran in there. And some formations, they only ran 2 plays, so like, it's about breaking it down. So like I said, there's a lot fewer secrets in there. So, Ant, do you want to talk about a little bit of is there a concern of guys having playbooks and the playbooks being out there, and does that actually help you as a defensive coach?
I mean, to a point, you want to have an understanding of what a team is trying to do to you, but no, I mean, them knowing your plays makes no difference at all. Everyone pretty much knows everyone's plays, especially once you get 5-6 games into the year. You've seen what everyone's doing with their personnel, what everyone's capable of. And a lot of things give away what you're going to do. I mean, formationally, personnel groupings, you can evaluate that you get a really good idea. And Richard Sherman talked a lot about this where he could narrow it down to a couple of plays. And that's why he was so good at getting the, because it all it's from your wide receiver, and they only run this many plays from this formation, and this offensive coordinator likes to run these types of routes, his concepts. And pretty soon he had it down to a couple of plays, and then as soon as the receiver gave him the type of look he wanted, he went ahead and jumped on it. And a lot of times he's just waiting for the ball, where it was. So yes, I think that sometimes, knowing what a team is going to do is great, but being able to execute and take it away is a whole other thing. And when you have dynamic players like the 49ers do, you already have stresses of one-on-one situations. So even if you have the perfect defense called, it doesn't mean you're still not going to lose one of those matchups because they're just so good. So I do think that there are advantages to knowing what you're going to see, but really you never know for sure. Ask Talanoa Hufanga. Last year, he thought he knew, and then they started breaking tendency and absolutely handling him, giving him looks that he thought, I can jump on this and make an instinctive play. And it really wasn't. So pre-snap read is one thing. Post-snap eyes are something completely different. You have to make sure you still are, okay, I know this might come, but I have to be prepared. If you overcommit, that's when you get a big explosive play done on you. So I think film work and preparation is important. But when in the grand scheme of things, you still have to play the game and you still have to execute. And that's part of the whole coaching process as well, making sure those players are in prime position to execute when their time is called. And a lot of it is knowing what they're looking at, knowing what they're seeing. I don't know how many times I've heard, they're like, hey, this corner needs to make sure he's prepared for this wide routes. It's like, or for the offensive coordinator, what his route concepts are. That's what's going to give you a more in-depth idea of what that receiver is going to do. Receiver tendencies and receiver. It's funny. There's I think it was Bill Walsh in one of the Super Bowls. Mike Wilson every single time would run a 15-yard comeback. And so in that game, he made it an 18-yard comeback, and they break off, and you break a tendency, and you get an easy catch. So, yeah, you might know what normally Kyle Shanahan does, but the next time that he changes something, you're in trouble. All of a sudden, you flip your hips, you're running the other way, and Brandon Ayuk just caught the ball underneath, and now he's turned upfield looking for something else. So, yes, it's nice to know, but it can be dangerous because if you guess wrong, it's going to be a big play.
And that's a perfect example too, because that's what happened on that big CMC touchdown this last year. Now, I did my breakdown. I thought that was not a play in the progression until I heard Kyle Shanahan talk about it in his press conference. And that's again, you can have the playbook and you can see it, and then they're going to do something that's a game plan specific thing. And so I usually give the caveat of, I'm not in the meeting rooms. I don't know this 100% certain, because what we did is we ran a normal concept that we run where we clear out one side of the field and you run a deep over. It's a speedo concept that I was talking about earlier, but you run that high crosser and you have a flat route there. And then we ran McCaffrey on what's called a rail route, which is a fade down the sideline from the running back position. Now, I've seen that, not in that play, but there's another play we run that I'd seen in the playbook that we have a concept that goes to one side of the field, and then we had a rail route from the running back that was not even in the progression. And it's literally just there to hold a backside corner. And so I'm looking at that and saying, okay, well, the playbook tells me that that's probably not even progression. And then Kyle Shanahan comes out in his press conference and he says, yeah, that was a play we thought we could hit based if we got the right look from the defense. And then you piece together, okay, what was the design here is that just like you said, it's a tendency breaker that you're playing a division opponent, Pep Hamilton, that he's dropping back and he sees Ayuk go on that speed over route, which we burned them on 3 times with against in the first meeting, and he goes to match that over route and completely vacates his deep quarter of the field. And so now they can take McCaffrey and go, because the way Gannon's rules worked is that hook defender in their cover 4 was not going to match vertical. And so it looks like, and that way, then you have manufactured this guy wide open. And that's a play that drives me nuts, because people sit there and go, well, yeah, I mean, Brock Purdy's numbers look great because he's got a running back so open he can fall down and then still run in for a touchdown. Okay, that was one play in that game, and he still had to avoid a guy immediately up the middle on him, and hang on that play. But you have those things, like you said, they're tendency breakers. And when you start seeing teams jump on stuff, the big touchdown we had to George Kittle against Seattle, you look at that on the film. We came out with a heavy run personnel with with 2 backs, 2 tight ends, and we run it left, and the corner and the safety both drive hard on the run action, and they see it, and it's like a 1-yard loss. So Kyle Shanahan comes out the next play, and he runs a play action pass where Kittle's going to fake like he's going to block and then go down the sideline, and they jump on it again, and you hit him. So, like you said, knowing what you're going to do, but being able to still have those pre and post snap eyes to understand what you're seeing that quickly is huge. And that's generally what has made the 49ers defense so tough and so good, especially under Steve Wilkes. And that leads into a question that I had here from Glass City. He says, what made the Niners defense so good against the run last year compared to this year? Is it personnel or scheme? So a couple things I want to look in there, and then I'll let you dive into this. I think one, our run defense has been streaky this year. 2, I think our run defense last year was not quite as good as sometimes people would look at. Last year, our run defense at the beginning of the year was spotty, very, very spotty, especially when you go back and you look at like the Atlanta game where Nick Bosa was out half the game and Armstead wasn't there. Our run defense in that Atlanta game was terrible. It was really bad. So our run defense, though, down the stretch of the season at the end of the year last year was very, very good. That's because you had a healthy Eric Armstead. And like you had said, when you have a healthy Armstead in there, that is a lot different in the run game. So what do you think? Do you see a big difference from last year or this year?
I don't. I think that it's the same thing. I mean, when we had Hassan Ridgeway last year, that helped a little bit in the run defense. Having the big size always is good. But the 49ers made a decision. They decided, hey, we're going with guys who are quicker, who are faster, who can disrupt. This is what Chris Kasarik likes. And those are the guys that they want. And a lot of times it works out. It's just sometimes certain teams. But let's be honest, the way the 49ers offense is playing this year, yeah, you want to stop the run, but if the other team from behind, because you got a couple of starts to go away a little bit. So a lot of times there's a give and take. You have to make sure your focuses are where you want them to be, and they've put a premium on getting after the quarterback over stopping the run as far as personnel, even though they say stopping the run is the number one goal. But really the run defense to me has been pretty good because they still don't give up that many yards, per game. They keep it under 100. The Ravens give up 102 yards per game if you're just looking at the stats. So I think the 49ers defense, they play good. I know it's a little bit of a scheme difference this year. But to me, it's been good. Kinlaw and Givens have been good. As long as Armstead and Hargrave are there, the 49ers are going to have a good run defense. If they're not, it gets a little spotty. But you can, for all 32 teams, 2 dogs, you're probably not going to be as good against the run.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I was just thinking of something and it totally just jumped out of my brain real quick. So I'm trying to gather what I was about to say. Cause you made a great point in there. But we'll just have to move on off that. It was something to do with the defense, and it was a good point, but I totally lost it. Got distracted by squirrel or something. Moving on a little bit away from the run game and the struggles there. What has been your biggest surprise from the team this year? Is there something, looking back at how you felt the beginning of the year was going to be to now, and you say, wow, I did not see this coming?
I think it would have to be how good the secondary is playing. Because, I mean, even though I like Deommodore Lenoir a lot, I thought, him having to move to nickel, I was concerned about. And so there were a lot of high hopes for Isaiah Oliver, but we didn't really know what he was going to look like playing in the nickel. He's very good against the run, but, he struggles a little bit in the pass game. But I thought that the emergence of Ambry Thomas has really solidified the back end. And I think that's important because if those guys wouldn't have been able to cover like they did against Philadelphia, I mean, I know the aren't the best for that Philadelphia run. The fact that they were able to cover for that long and Jalen Hurts, was struggling a little bit, I think goes to show how good they are. But I really want to highlight Deommodore Lenoir because to me, playing outside and inside, I don't think people realize how difficult that is just to understand the different concepts he's going to go against, to understand his different responsibilities. He's not just a corner. He's also a linebacker when he's in the nickel. There's just so much, and he has to help in run fits, and he does such a great job. to me, Deommodore Lenoir coming in is the biggest surprise, just how good he's translated between the two. I didn't know if that was going to be possible because it's hard for guys to do that. He's getting real conversation for versatility and how he's played. Because outside, if he was just playing outside consistently, he would be up with those names. The guy does not give up. He's fantastic. But Ambry Thomas, and I know it's a consistent battle with Ambry Thomas. Sometimes he gives too much cushion. Sometimes he doesn't drive on the football as much as I would like him to do. But he showed ball skills this year. He showed competitiveness. He's been coming up and making some tackles. And I feel like he's doing a lot better with some of the things that he needed to do technique-wise. And I think I give a lot of credit to Steve Wilks, because now we're finally seeing Ambry Thomas read through the wide receiver, sometimes to the quarterback, and that's helping a lot. I think before he would get too zoned in on either the wide receiver or the quarterback and couldn't do both, and now you're seeing a more advanced Ambry Thomas. So bravo to Steve Wilks in that back end for really surprising me. And if you can marry the front and the back like they have, that's when you get a really successful defense.
I love that answer. You know, I had a show with Steph Sanchez, and it was last week, and we were talking about, I had asked her, you know, who would be the defensive MVP to you? And she you know, said the regular suspects. She, you know, you can make a case for Nick Bosa, you can make a case for Fred Warner. She goes, I kind of leaning towards Deommodore Lenoir, and we ended up going off a tangent on that because I was sitting there, I was like, I don't know. And then the more we talked, and I said some of the exact same things you're saying of how hard it is to go from the outside to the slot, that there are completely different drop techniques you have. There's different vision techniques you have. You play with different leverage. You're filling different run gaps. Your eyes have to be in different places. Like it is not just a guy can play corner, and so now he can play in the slot. Like you just move this guy in there, and he's a good coverage guy and can be there. If you move Patrick Surtain into the slot, he's still going to be a really good corner. He's not going to play with the same techniques that he played on the outside, but you're not guaranteed that he's going to be a great slot guy, because just because a guy is really good on the outside doesn't mean he's going to be a really good slot guy. You know, Darrelle Revis was a really, really good outside guy. He probably would have done really well in the slot, but we're not guaranteed that. It reminds me of Carlos Rogers. I think Deommodore Lenoir reminds me a lot of Carlos Rogers. He's got similar height, similar build, and that ability to go outside and inside. But we have to remember, Carlos Rogers, when he came here and did that with us, he was a vet. He had been in the league like 6-7 years when he did that and was able to move inside. He had mastered outside. Deommodore Lenoir is in his third season, and he's now doing this, and he's been getting moved back and forth. Like, to me, Demo has been a huge addition to how he's playing and solidified that slot, because what it always looked like to me was Isaiah Oliver was much better in zone, but terrible in man coverage in the slot. I liked his physicality in the run game, liked how he played a lot of zone, hated him in man coverage. He was a massive liability in man coverage. And Steve Wilks likes to play man more than D'Amico Ryans did. But Ambry Thomas, to me, it was like he was always a lot better in man, but like you said, struggled with vision of reading the receiver through to the quarterback, sitting in zones and doing that. He would bust his zones and he would give up big plays. And that was a problem. He had a hard time with some of our palms coverage, reading the number 2 receiver right. He was supposed to convert to a cloud coverage and would stay in a deep quarter, and it would give up plays, especially in the 2-minute situation. It'd be really frustrating. I saw that against the Steelers. I was watching that game, and that 2-minute drive that the Steelers had at the end of the first half, what was actually supposed to happen, Deommodore Lenoir 3 times gave up a short outside pass when he was supposed to convert his coverage and didn't. And they yanked him at halftime. And people, I remember I put it on my Twitter when that happened. I was like, the only negative from the Steelers game was that Ambry Thomas played so poorly in the first half, they yanked him. And people are like, no, he got hurt. I said, no. He came in later in the game for a special teams play. And then he came in when Isaiah Oliver got dinged up on something. He was in when we had a pick. He was on the field. I was like, no, he got yanked because he was blowing his assignments, and he was giving up plays, quick outs to stop the clock that let the Steelers go down the field. And so he was struggling in zones. And I was like, if we could get something, of a balance here between Oliver and Thomas, like, because one guy was really good in zone, one guy was really good in man, and they're both really bad at the opposite. And it was a liability. What do you call? And you can't just put one guy out there when you call one thing and another guy out there when you call another. That's like a giant red flag to the offense. Hey, guess what? We're going to be in man coverage this time. Avery Thomas is on the field. The fact that he has elevated his zone play has been huge as well. And those two guys have really solidified the back end. And again, credit to Steve Wilks and what he's done. A lot of people were calling for Wilks' head there for a while. And I kept telling people like, hey, calm down. One, who are you going to replace him with in the middle of the season? Two, let's give him some time to figure it out. But let me ask you this. How confident are you in this team heading into January? Like, if you were to put this in perspective from 2022, 2021, 2019, different years of 49ers teams, maybe even going back farther, how do you feel about this team compared to other teams as we head into January?
Yeah, I think this is the most confident I've been in a while. I think 2019, I had a state of confidence, maybe a little false confidence in the fact that, Jimmy Garoppolo could consistently make the plays that he was making during that season. And I think we were all kind of riding off the high of once we saw the offensive explosion against New Orleans. It was like, oh, man, this offense is here. Emmanuel Sanders. I had a lot of confidence in that season. I thought that defense was the defense that could beat anybody. I thought they could stop Kansas City. I thought, I just had a lot of confidence in D Ford and Nick Bosa and that ability to get the edge pressure, but also, Buckner and those guys in the middle. It was a real force. I think I have more confidence this season. And the real reason is there's nobody cool or calmer in the pocket than Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy, he just looks comfortable. And I think that's the biggest draw that I get from every film is just how his demeanor is in the pocket. He makes everyone else feel confident that he's going to make the play. And he's absolutely precision. I mean, the anticipatory throw level. So he gives me the ability to be confident. And I think that I just feel like Kyle has all the weapons he needs now on offense. Defense didn't stop the opposing team and hold them under 20. We might not win. This time, you might score 30 and you might not win against this 49ers football team. So we finally have complete balance, a really, really good defense and a really, really good offense. And when you have that, that's when you become a team of destiny. That's what Bill Walsh used to always talk about. You have to have both. You have to be good in all areas of the game, complementary football. And I think the 49ers finally have that. Do I wish special teams played better at times with kick coverage and things like that? Absolutely. But you can mask those things, kick the ball, the end zone, that sort of thing. But to me, this is the most confidence I've had in the team since probably since I was a kid. And I always believed they were going to win every single time. And the film just shows this team is really good. And when they execute, the only people that can stop them is themselves.
I love that. And going back to 2019, like you said, during that stretch when we had the big win over Green Bay and then New Orleans, and then ended up losing to the Ravens in that game where it had been raining for like 24 hours straight going into the game, and Robbie Gould misses a 48-yard field goal, and Justin Tucker nails like a 49-yard field goal to win. During that time, it's easy now to stand here and after the history of the last 3-4 years with Jimmy G, to say, well, obviously there was reason to not be as confident going into that year. But you go, actually, when you look at how Jimmy was playing during that last half of the stretch of 2019, he was playing as well as about any quarterback we'd seen. I mean, his yards per game during that stretch was like 275 yards per game. To put that in perspective, Brock Purdy on this year is at 271. Like over a 16-game season, it would be like 4,400 yards. Jimmy was playing really well, and it was like something like 34 touchdowns to 6 interceptions as like a pace for there. He played the best football of his career was during that stretch. Now, it wasn't sustainable, obviously. Team started figuring out that he was going to jam the ball in there no matter what, and he wouldn't throw the ball away. That was one of his biggest problems, is he would never ever throw the ball away, and it was so frustrating. Like, dude, you don't turn the ball over with this team, and you'll do really well. And then obviously the injury to D Ford, and you saw how the defense went off a cliff, because they went from giving up like 14 points a game to 29 points per game when D Ford wasn't on the field, and so we had a lot of reason to feel really confident in that team. So I don't think it was necessarily like fool's gold, no pun intended, to be confident in that team. But this team this year feels different. because Brock Purdy is putting up the kind of numbers that Jimmy G did during that stretch, but with fewer passing attempts, hitting more areas of the field, is running the offense at such a smooth and high level that I have not felt this confident about a 49ers offense since Steve Young was helming the team. Like the last time I felt this confident in a 49ers offense was 1998. And you start looking at, in that 1998 season when they had Jerry Rice and Terrell Owens and Steve Young at quarterback was, to me, will always be, pun intended, gold standard of the 49ers. That's the year they set the franchise record for most points in the season at 505 points. They were averaging like 400 yards a game in offense. Steve Young was playing out of his mind. His quarterback rating on that year was like 119, something like that. Brock Purdy is still higher this year. He's set to break that record this year. Steve threw for 36 touchdowns. Brock Purdy might be able to break that record. This offense, we saw nothing like this in the Harbaugh era. Haven't seen an offense look this smooth, this in command of everything during the last, since Shanahan has been here. This is something, and I've been telling different people on my channel, I'm like, guys, we just need to soak this in. Come into the waters. The waters are good. The waters are warm. Let's just soak in this, because what we are watching is something special. We're looking at something that we have not seen for 25 years as far as 49ers offensive football and how good this team is. And people say, well, it's the weapons. It's the weapons and it's a scheme and it's not all Brock Purdy. And my always thing that I come back with is I go, yeah, it is Brock Purdy. Even if you say that, even if you buy into that, Brock Purdy's making $980,000 this year and he's playing the way he is. That's why they have all the weapons. So, you still got to credit him, because you never see a 7th round quarterback come in and operate an offense like this. Even if you say he's like a marginal 15th, ranked quarterback, which I don't agree with at all. Even if you make that argument, for a 7th round rookie to come in and do that on his pay scale, in his second year, that's why you can afford to have all these weapons. So yeah, you still got to give Brock Purdy credit. So yeah, it's still the MVP. Anyways, I hate some of the arguments there with Brock Purdy, but I love it. I agree with you that I think, this is the most confident I have felt about the 49ers since the dynasty era. And it's hard. Like, I keep wanting to pump the brakes with Brock Purdy a little bit, just because I want to be like, there's no way a guy in his second year in the league is really this good. But I watched the film, and I know you do as well. And just watching him operate, he is so smooth. And he understands the minute details of players and coverage so well. He sees it so well. You're not seeing he's predetermining this throw pre-snap and gonna make it no matter what. Like, you'll see him read that safety, move to a corner, move to one of the hardest throws in football, and make it like it's not a problem. You don't see quarterbacks do that. That is not normal. And it's really hard to believe that a guy in his second year looks like Drew Brees in year 8. Like, that is hard for me to wrap my mind around because of how good Drew Brees was and how special he was. But to see a guy operate an offense like Drew Brees, who's in year 2, who was drafted in the 7th round, I think that's why people are having a hard time buying in. It's like it bursts your brain. This cannot be real. Like, it's almost like watching, David Copperfield go through the Great Wall of China. You're like, that cannot have happened. That can't have really have happened. So you want to believe that there's something going on, but this is a situation. There's no smoke and mirrors here. Like, this is real, what Brock Purdy is doing. And I think it's amazing. Another super chat here from Glass City. I'll let you answer this question. He says, how does Baltimore's D-line compare to Philly last year? They have elite pass D. Is that because of a great secondary or a great pass rush? I think this is a great question.
Yeah, I like Baltimore's defensive line. I think they're very tough. I don't think they're good in a pass rush last year. I think the Philadelphia Eagles had captured lightning in a bottle with the speed that they could present off the outside, but also the physicality that they brought on the inside with Fletcher Cox. And to me, that they were better in that comparison. But I do think Baltimore's defensive line is very good. Jadeveon Clowney is very good at setting the edge in the run game. And he's shown that this year he can get after the quarterback a little. How much of that is him upset about what happened in Cleveland last year. Myles Garrett's getting all the good reps and I'm doing all the dirty work. I don't know. But to me, they are going to be able to bring pressure. They're pretty good. But I would say that they're more stout about the way that they go about their business and handle things. So do I like the Baltimore defensive line? Answer, yes. I like them against the run more than I like them against the pass. But they can present some problems in that area too. So we'll see. I mean, Oweh and Jadeveon Clowney against, Trent Williams and Colt McKivitz should make for some good television.
I've been a little surprised with Jadeveon Clowney. Like, he turns out he's got some juice left. The guy's got like 7.5 sacks on the year. And he's playing with some juice. One thing, when I was watching the tape right before I left my house to come here to do this, I was watching their film against the Jaguars. And one thing that really stood out to me is that their D-line is good, but they're not doing really, really well just because of their defensive line. Their defense they're the number one defense in the NFL because they don't really have a weak link. When you look at their defense on film, you're not sitting here going, oh, okay, yeah, they're not as good as they look. We can go after this. They're really solid everywhere. And they're good on the defensive line. They have guys that do their jobs really, really well. I think if you were going to go into a game in maybe, look at a team, because we always say the 49ers arguably have the best linebacker duo in the league. But nobody ever mentions, who are you going to argue that with? Like, why are we saying arguably? Who's got a better linebacker combo? I think if there was any team in the league that you could make an argument that you could, I don't know if I believe it, but you could make an argument, has the best linebacker duo in the league to compete with the 49ers, it's going to be the Ravens. The way that Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen have been playing, and when you see them on tape, it reminds you a lot of Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Now, Roquan Smith is not quite the athlete that Fred Warner is. He doesn't have quite the speed, but he can thump a little bit more in filling some gaps there than Fred does. He's a little bit bigger of a guy, and so they present things. They're fast. They attack. They track lanes really, really well. They diagnose things really quickly, and they see things. They drop into their zones and force layered throws and take away certain routes really well. That things that you see from Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. And so, when you have a good defensive line and you have really good linebackers and your corners are playing well and your safeties are playing really well, and then 14, their slot guy is like a Swiss Army knife. They move him around. They ask him to do a lot of different things. And then you bring in a young defensive coordinator who came up under John Harbaugh, and he's brought in and added things to that Ravens playbook. I've seen him run things that, like I saw Miami run last year, certain blitz packages that are really good to manufacture rushes, but also drop 7 in coverage. And some of the disguises they had, I was like, dang, that was pretty funky. Where it reminds you of some of the things that Steve Wilkes and DeMeco Ryans have done with the 49ers the last couple of years, of being able to make things look completely like a different coverage, and then guys are running around and they're flying into different coverages that make it really hard for the quarterback to work post snap. And 92, their defensive tackle, I looked up his name because I'm trying to remember how it says, but it's Matabike, I believe is how you say his name. He's got 12.5 sacks on the year, and he does pop off tape. Now, a guy that I was kind of looking at tape and going, that guy's a beast, is I believe it's Travis Jones, is their defensive tackle. That dude is a monster of a man. Like, when you see guys on tape that just look bigger than everybody else, when there's a field full of really big guys and teams are having a hard time moving him, that says something. He's an anchor there at nose tackle, and he's going to be a guy that I think Jake Brendels and John Feliciano are going to have their hands full with him. He's a good guy. I wonder how we are going to try and personnel wise attack them, if we're going to want to be more 11 personnel to get them in their nickel package. I believe we're going to try and do a lot more base. I think they want to keep their base defense on the field. I don't think they want that. You want to allow them to use their speed as much. This is going to be a game that, and I think, I remember I was watching the tape, and I think I got through the first quarter against the Jaguars, and what I was seeing, I was like, I think there's some openings here for some screen passes, wide receiver screens, just the way that they played defense and the way that their formations and the way they were stacking up. And then as I got into like the second and third quarter of the Jaguars game, I saw they threw like 8 screen passes to wide receivers over the next 2 quarters. And I was like, okay, Doug Peterson was seeing the same thing I was. Because I put it on Twitter. I was like, I see this as a game where Debo's going to get like 5 or 6 screen passes. I still believe on that. I think that that's how you're going to keep them off balance. I think you're going to have to try and out leverage them because they're too disciplined. I don't think you can just go at them, and they don't have a lot of weak links in there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. And that front seven is definitely a strength. The linebackers, to me, pop every single time you see them. They're running through people. I think this is the closest I've seen to a team that can try to limit Christian McCaffrey, even if they get a matchup that's linebacker on McCaffrey. I do think McCaffrey's going to win because he's just so great. But normally you come into every single game, and you're like, hey, our goal is to get Christian McCaffrey one-on-one, whether that's in the run game or in the passing game. You're like, hey, we're good. But I think in this one, it's a tougher matchup. And you talked about Kyle Hamilton a little bit. Now he plays, the slot for them. And I think that was a matchup too. I found that the Jaguars took advantage of sometimes getting Calvin Ridley matched up on him, and they were finding some space. So that made me think right away, well, there's another area the 49ers could attack is Hamilton, but he's good. How many big defensive backs like that can move and cover the way he does? Be able to be so fun. So you're right. When you look at their defense, you don't find weaknesses. I do a video every single week where I talk about the key matchups for the 49ers on offense that they can exploit against the opposing defense. And normally I can find 5, 6, 7 matchups, depending on. This one's going to be a lot tougher because there are just not a lot of really good things that go your way. And you brought up Jake Brendel. That's one of the big handled last week. Some big, very physical, very explosive interior defensive linemen. The 49ers usually take advantage of 3-4 defenses. What they want to do is get movement, create a area to run there. And they use, nice blocks with, Warner and Kittle have been so good at it this year. Juszczyk as well. I don't know how that's going to work. Normally that's the area you attack, those outside linebackers. But Jadeveon Clowney's so good at setting an edge. I'm like, where is the avenue in the run game that you can have the most success? So I don't know exactly how they're going to attack it yet. I continue to search for those opportunities. But I think with this team, you're going to have to be very clear on what you're going to have to do. And I think it might be one of those things where you loosen them up with the passing game and then go with a run game after that. Because this Baltimore Ravens defense is so good. And you're right. Scheme-wise, I don't know if the defensive coordinator learned more things when he went to Michigan for a year or what. But when he came back, they have been so good. And they're just throwing people off, disguising. Brock Purdy's going to have all he can handle. And so is this run game. And normally the run game powers everything. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup and a very tough matchup for the 49ers, especially on the offensive line.
Yeah. And I think one thing when you look at how we've played different 3-4 teams, I would expect a lot of 2 tight end sets or, using Juszczyk as a tight end. What you want to do is you want to widen that outside linebacker guy, because when we have just tried to come out in pro sets of fullback in the backfield, we've struggled, getting that edge extended, and then had a hard time handling 5 and 4 eye techniques. So guys, on the out, like head up or inside of the tackle, because that's usually on that guard to execute a reach block on them. And then when you can't do that and you try and run something inside, then your center has to be able to handle that nose tackle. And we haven't been able to do that really well. And so I see it as a tough go in the run game. One way of maybe trying to exploit that is going to be to extend that edge outside linebacker, go to a 2 tight end set on that side, really, try and outflank them. And so they're going to keep pushing that linebacker out. And now you can have, Warner and Kittle on a combo block to widen the edge and then get Kittle up the middle, sort of a thing. Or you do come back with a fullback inside and you condense everything in and you throw those wide receiver screens. You're going to have those reverses, that we see with Debo. I think Debo is going to be a big matchup here. They're going to try and get him matched up, I think, on Roquan Smith over the middle in the pass game. That's one thing I see them trying to do is get him on some of these choice routes on Roquan Smith or McCaffrey there. I see it more with Debo. I think McCaffrey's too predictable. I think they're, what we've seen, like what the Cardinals were doing this last game is they kept dropping an eighth guy, and they were either having him peel off and cover Kittle or peel off and cover McCaffrey, because they were trying to double that and take away so many of those choice routes, because we ate them up with choice routes. Like the first meeting we had, that they kept clearing out underneath, and then choice route, and Brock Purdy, set a franchise record for completion percentage. And so they were dropping that outside guy and coming with 3 while doubling Kittle or McCaffrey to take away those choice routes, to bracket them on each side so that, they weren't given those routes so much. Maybe the Ravens try and do that, and maybe they're trying to do that and against McCaffrey. And so I see Debo as your guy that you're going to match up on Roquan Smith, get him on the move. I see that as a good thing. Well, this has been a really fun episode. It's always great to talk to somebody who's very knowledgeable and well spoken and knows everything. While we start to head out of here, what can people expect when they see one of your shows? For maybe some listeners on my side that aren't as familiar with you. Obviously this might maybe their first introduction to you, and I think it's been a fantastic introduction. Again, tell us where they can find you and what they can expect, and kind of your schedule of shows.
Yeah, so it's 49ers Cutback anywhere, social media, YouTube, Believe, that's all audio platforms. Wherever you listen, you can find me. And what you're going to get is I'm really just about the football. I don't care other stories that are going on, the clickbait stuff. That's not what I'm about. I'm about what happens on the field. And I put out videos every single day, sometimes more than one, at least one a day. I get into matchups. I get into, the team that you're going to play, what happened after I watch the video. That's what I'm about. It's whatever happens on the field, X's and O's wise. That's what I'm talking about. I do some news updates as well. So if you like a little bit of the news, I'll give you an update on the injuries or whatever, stuff like that. But for the most part, that's my focus, is just what's happening on the field and what matchups we're going to see. So that way, when we get to the game, we are prepared. We understand what we're looking for and what happens. Like, you see all of a sudden, hey, there Debo Samuel's doing this. It's like Johnny just gave it down of Debo against Roquan Smith. Well, you see all the motions and shifts that Kyle does before the play, and it gets Debo lined up one-on-one with Smith. You knew it was going to. My sister's boyfriend, Warren, he was sitting on the couch, and I'm like, oh, George Kittle's going to be open on this play. Sure enough, George Kittle's wide open on this play. And it's only because occasionally you can hit those right because you watch so much film and you're prepared. So yeah, just come over and check it out. I just have a lot of fun. When I do my lives, there's a lot of interaction, so just join me for those. But that's what it's about. All the football, none of the fuss. That's what I love to do.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you so much for coming on. And if you are watching on my channel, make sure you go over there and sub to 49ers Cutback. Like you said, he does some great stuff. Check it out. And thank you so much, Ant, for being here. And we're going to roll it out of here and get you off on the road. I got to get home. My wife's got to take my son to the chiropractor. So she's probably texting me saying, hey, you need to get off the show now and get home. But I appreciate you so much for coming on. This has been a great show. And so in the chat, if you're on my channel, we are going live tomorrow morning. I'm going to have some clips from the Ravens film as I scouted them, and I'm going to go live with Adam tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we will break down a little bit of the film and get into it, but not real quick. I got some Christmas shopping to do. But anyways, as always, thanks for joining in. Stay safe, stay healthy, and go Niners.